A father, once a survival expert, took his young daughter hiking through the Rocky Mountains on a routine outing, and then they vanished without a trace. As if swallowed by the air, despite years of experience with rugged terrain. For 5 years, the mountains kept their cold silence, while a mother waited in vain for answers that never came, until 2 geology students rappelled down a remote crevice and found something they thought was trash, but which carried the only clue that could rewrite the entire story from the beginning. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest stories. A faded painting hung on the wall, a grizzly bear raising its head before snow-capped mountains, seeming to mock Natalie O'Brien from its high perch in the hotel room. Outside the window, just beyond the southern edge of Rocky Mountain National Park, the sun had drained the sky of light, leaving the murky purple glow of an early October evening. It was 7:15 p.m., 15 minutes past the agreed-upon return time. In the world, Natalie and her husband Connor O'Brien shared a world of climbing ropes, topographic maps, and minute-by-minute schedules. 15 minutes was an acceptable margin of error. 60 minutes was cause for concern. But at 90 minutes, the calm forged through years of adventuring together began to crack like an overused climbing rope. Her husband wasn't the type to get lost. He wasn't just an outdoor enthusiast, he was a devoted disciple of the wilderness. Connor O'Brien moved through the mountains with an almost ceremonial calm. He read the terrain like a linguist reading ancient poetry, understanding every dry stream bed, every shift in the wind, every subtle change in the color of stone moss. He was the kind of man who carried 3 different ways to start a fire for a short hike, who trained Boy Scouts and new soldiers every weekend, who believed that nature never erred, only careless humans paid the price. The idea that he, a man who had spent months living in a snow tent in Alaska, could get lost just a few miles from a marked trail seemed absurd. So, when the digital clock on the bedside table ticked to 8:30, a thick, cold dread began to grip Natalie's stomach. This was no longer a minor hiccup in the plan. It was the first signal of a nightmare. She and Connor had a 14-month-old daughter, Maisie. That thought pierced her mind like a shard of ice. Connor was cautious, but with Maisie, that caution was amplified tenfold. He'd account for extra time to change diapers, soothe her, or stop when she giggled at a squirrel. He would never risk being stuck in the mountains after dark with her. Not Connor, not with Maisie. At 9 p.m., Natalie acted. Her hands didn't shake as she dialed the National Park Service's Coordination Center. She silently cursed herself for not joining them today. She had opted out of the trip to finish an urban landscaping project, and now the excuse of stepping back to let father and daughter bond felt like a cruel joke. She explained in a programmed, even tone, but on the other end was only a cold, faceless middle-aged male voice. She recounted every detail, line by line. Connor O'Brien, 36 years old. Maisie O'Brien, 14 months old. Their car, a silver Subaru, still sat untouched in the Pine Hollow Lodge parking lot. Their planned route, Timberline Ridge Trail, a less traveled but clearly marked path on the park's eastern side. Expected return time 7 p.m., 7:30 at the latest. The most critical piece of information Natalie had was on her phone. Connor's last message, sent at 10:32 a.m. She forwarded it to the coordinator. A few photos and 2 short videos. In one video, Connor's voice was soft and cheerful, pointing out a buck grazing quietly at the forest edge to Maisie. But it was the selfie that hit her heart the hardest and would later become the defining image of the disappearance. Connor was beaming, wearing the blue knit cap she'd made for his last birthday, a matching scarf around his neck. His sunglasses reflected a dense canopy of trees and a slice of crisp autumn sky. On his back, snug in a bright red baby carrier, was Maisie, her curious black eyes peeking out from under a sun hat. They looked healthy, happy, and completely at ease in their own world. The short caption with the photo was the last thing Natalie O'Brien ever heard from her husband. "The mountains are amazing today. Love you." When that message was sent, at 10:32 a.m. on October 9, 2018, Natalie was sitting in a small cafe in Estes Park, about 30 minutes from the park, checking work emails. Now, nearly 12 hours later, she sat curled up on the edge of the hotel bed, the phone screen glowing in the dark like the last remnant of something whole. At Moraine Ridge Ranger Station, the official missing persons report reached the desk of Head Ranger Elias Grant at 9:47 p.m. Elias, a 62-year-old man with silver-gray hair, had been with Rocky Mountain National Park for over 30 years. He'd seen it all: campers who forgot food and attracted bears, climbers crossing passes without water, and disappearances that never found answers. But when he read the report on Connor O'Brien, 36, and his 14-month-old daughter Maisie, an unusual feeling stirred. This wasn't a random tourist or amateur hiker. Connor was a professional, a former survival instructor who'd written books on wilderness survival. For someone like that to vanish without a trace, either he was ambushed by something sudden, or something entirely different was at play. Elias didn't hesitate. He issued an emergency search order that night. A first response team of 8 rangers and 4 local volunteers was deployed, equipped with headlamps, GPS devices, and thermal scanners. At the Elk Canyon trailhead, the route Natalie said Connor planned to take, the team set up a temporary command post. Everyone knew, if someone like Connor was in trouble, time was running out. They moved silently into the night forest, not shouting, not disturbing. They knew sound in the deep woods was absorbed by thick moss and pine needles, rarely carrying more than a few dozen steps. All focus was on the ground, the roots, the rocks, looking for a footprint, a piece of plastic, a torn scrap of fabric. But the first night passed in silence. Nothing, no signs, not a muddy footprint, not a torn branch. Helicopters were deployed the next morning, sweeping the northern slopes of the canyon, where GPS suggested Connor's last possible location, but from above, the pine forest looked like a velvet carpet, revealing no secrets. On the ground, Elias and the search team expanded their radius, splitting into 3 groups, moving clockwise, combing every square meter. Natalie, though asked to stay at the hotel, was at the temporary command post by 7 a.m. She didn't scream or cry. She just stared at the topographic map, pinned to a wooden board, where red pushpins grew denser. She knew, like Elias, that Connor wasn't the type to simply disappear. And if there were no traces, that was the most terrifying part. By the 3rd day, the search became a statewide operation. Rescue units from Colorado Springs and Fort Collins were called in. Pickup trucks loaded with ropes, tents, and medical kits lined the park's entrance. Over 60 people were involved. But still, nothing. A sign. A scrap of paper. A milk bottle. A shoe print. Nothing. That wasn't possible for an adult carrying an infant. Elias began to suspect. Alone in the command tent, he reviewed the process: starting point, departure time, expected pace. It all made sense. But what if they never entered the forest, or were taken another way? On the 4th day, a small spark of hope emerged. Marcus Lavin, a retired geologist and veteran volunteer, stumbled on something in the damp soil near Clearview Ravine while walking a steep slope. It was a brass compass. Its glass face cracked, its needle frozen. An antique, but here, it was the only thing resembling a clue. Elias examined it under a desk lamp. The brass was tarnished green, the back etched with intricate patterns. Could it be Connor's? A keepsake? Or a last resort after electronic devices failed? A theory formed. Connor lost his GPS. His phone died, and he relied on this compass, unaware it was broken, a wrong turn from a faulty needle. The search team reorganized, remapping their efforts around the dead needle. They scoured an additional 5 square kilometers of rugged northeastern terrain, steep and rocky. But nothing. By the 2nd week, the compass was sent to the Colorado Natural History Society. The results chilled Elias. The compass was from the 1930s. It couldn't have been Connor's. It was a lost relic, or worse, a false trail. Hope shattered again. And that's when the media shifted. No longer mysterious missing father, but Connor O'Brien, a mastermind fugitive. Articles spread theories that he'd staged his disappearance, faked the scene, and fled with his daughter from their current life. Some suggested a breakdown. Others said he wanted to return to nature permanently. Natalie, amidst the media storm, held on to one truth. She knew Connor wasn't like that. And so when everyone else stopped, she began following her own trail, quietly. No media, no search teams, just a mother and an unkept promise. Natalie O'Brien no longer trusted authorities or rescue teams with their microphones and thermal scanners. Because if a man like Connor meticulous, methodical, fiercely devoted to his daughter, could disappear like a wisp of smoke in the forest. Then all procedures were just formalities. She hired 3 private investigators over the next year. One was a former FBI agent, one a retired National Park ranger, and the last a local with owl-like eyes and a memory like a living map. All 3 reached the same conclusion: no trace left the park, no cameras, no credit cards, no license plates. Connor didn't flee, he was swallowed. But by what? An animal? A fall? Or something darker? In the years that followed, Natalie returned to Elk Canyon every October. Always alone, always walking the exact route Connor had chosen. Sometimes she'd stop for hours at a bend, where he'd photographed a deer, just to feel if something lingered, a vibration, a memory etched in stone. She never found anything, but she never gave up either. The compass, the only thing the search team had clung to as a clue, was returned to Elias Grant's old office, now retired. It sat in a wooden box among files labeled Unresolved Cases. Elias, now 67, still dreamed of Connor and Maisie. In his dreams, Connor stood on a ridge, holding his daughter, smiling at him without speaking. Then he vanished. Just like in reality. The nightmare persisted until August 2023. At 6 a.m. on the 12th, a strange call reached Elias's old personal number from Beaver Ridge Ranger Station. A young ranger named Camille, her voice urgent but clear, said 2 geology students from the University of Montana had brought in something odd. A bright red baby carrier, the expensive kind used for long hiking trips, found wedged in a rocky crevice 270 feet above the canyon floor, jammed in as if deliberately placed. Elias stood up. "Red carrier?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Any brand, black straps, and a padded back?" Camille confirmed. "Yes. And there's a moldy plastic bottle inside." Elias didn't wait a second longer. Within 4 hours, he was at the ranger station. When Elias saw the carrier, time froze. He stepped slowly, head tilted, as if facing a reopened wound. The carrier was unmistakable: bright red silver-gray straps, Columbia logo, and slightly worn fabric at the bottom left corner. In the photo, the one Connor sent Natalie that final morning, and now, it was here before him. Heavy, dirty, but strangely intact. Elias signaled for the carrier to be sealed and sent to the forensic lab in Missoula. The forensic team, led by Dr. Felicia Dent, took over. A quiet woman who spoke to evidence as if it could answer. Felicia began a complex analysis, measuring fabric fading, UV testing, checking nylon strap degradation, and examining the foam in the padded back. The results stunned her. The fabric retained high elasticity. The foam showed no mold or microbial decay. The red color was still unnaturally vibrant. It couldn't have been outdoors for 5 years, she said. It was exposed to sunlight for a few months at most. 6, tops. Elias sank into his chair. So where was it all that time? Felicia shook her head. Somewhere dark, dry, sealed, maybe a cave, maybe a house. Elias felt the air drain from him. What did this mean? That Connor and Maisie might have survived. That someone hid the carrier, and then for some reason placed it back in the mountains recently? Why? To lead them, or to cover tracks? And who? In a March weather report, Felicia found the first answer. A fierce 6-hour storm had swept the park's western slope, causing landslides, washing away wooden bridges, and creating temporary water flows. Using a LiDAR-based terrain simulation, she and Elias modeled how floodwaters could carry a light object, like a carrier, and they traced the water's path backward. That water, strong and singular, could only have started from one place, a steep rocky valley called Lost Widow Hollow, a name found only on old military maps. Elias had never considered it. It was far from the original search area, nearly 9 miles, as the crow flies from Connor's chosen route. With terrain so treacherous, no one had ventured there during the 2018 rescue effort. Elias snapped the map shut. "We searched the wrong direction," he said, almost inaudibly. "And now, we need to find where that carrier was kept for 5 years." Felicia nodded. "We're not looking for missing people anymore, we're tracing a water flow." And with a damp carrier, a hydrological map, and a wound that never healed, they started again, from the beginning. Lauren O'Brien never truly returned. She still lived in the wooden house on the outskirts of Boulder, where Connor had handcrafted every window frame and built bookshelves for Maisie. She kept everything in her daughter's room untouched, the pale pink blanket with white rabbits, the one-eyed teddy bear, and the framed photo of the three of them smiling on the slopes of Emerald Lake. But her heart was stuck out there, on the wild ridges of the Rockies, in an October day that never ended. For 5 years, Lauren lived in two realities, the silence of everyday life and the chaos within. Where every day asked if I had gone with them, if I had said no, if I had kept them back, what would have changed? She refused to abandon hope. Others called it delusion, obsession, denial, but Lauren didn't care, because she knew Connor. He would never abandon his daughter. If he died protecting her. And if he had a chance to live, he would have done everything to keep Maisie safe. She read every report, reconstructed maps, printed dozens of topographic charts, and hand-drew hypotheses. She learned to read satellite imagery, analyze geological patterns, and even took a basic survival course, just to understand what Connor might have done when the worst happened. She stayed in touch with Elias Grant, even after his retirement. It was Elias who called her the day the carrier appeared. "Lauren," he said, his voice unlike the hundreds of times he'd told her, "no new leads, we have evidence, not just anyone's." Connor's. Lauren went silent, not breathing, not blinking. "The carrier?" she whispered. "Is it the one? The red one? Columbia, black straps, padded back, like in the photo." Lauren sank to the kitchen floor, amid water spilling from an unclosed faucet, but she felt nothing. Only a sound in her head, Maisie's cry the last time they parted. She remembered Connor's words as he headed to the car. "Just one day, I'll tell you all about it tonight." But that evening never came. After Elias's call, Lauren didn't sleep. She drove through the night to Missoula, nearly 900 miles in 13 hours, just to see the carrier with her own eyes. When Felicia Dent led her into the forensics lab, Lauren stood 3 feet from the carrier, hands clutching her chest, as if to keep her heart from breaking. "Can I?" she asked. Felicia nodded. Lauren leaned down, placing a hand on the faded fabric. She recognized the small tear on the shoulder strap, a mark Connor had once texted about. "Gotta patch it or Maisie might scratch herself." She broke down, unable to hold back, not because of the carrier, but because it was too new. Too intact. It couldn't have been outside for 5 years. That meant for most of that time, it was kept somewhere. And where was Maisie? If it was so carefully preserved, who did it? Connor? A stranger? Or someone who took them both? Felicia pointed to the LiDAR model and the simulated flood path. "We believe it was kept high up in Lost Widow Hollow, never searched before." Lauren traced her finger along the water channels on the map, stopping at the endpoint. "If I wanted to keep my child alive, and I was injured, I'd find somewhere dry, sealed, high, and rarely visited." "You're thinking what we're thinking," Elias said. "We're not looking for people anymore. We're looking for the place that hid the carrier, and maybe her." Lauren looked up, her eyes shining for the first time in years. "I want to go with you." "No," Elias shook his head instantly. "It's too dangerous." "I'm not asking," she replied, her voice no longer that of a desperate mother, but a survivor. "I'm telling you." Elias knew from her eyes that he couldn't stop her. And perhaps he shouldn't, because sometimes, only a mother who never gave up could see what every investigator had missed. She wasn't a searcher. She was the one left behind, and she would go to the very end. They left Missoula before dawn the next day. A small team, as Lauren wanted, 2 geologists from the University of Montana, Ben Carter and Sarah Klein, an experienced mountaineering coordinator named Randy Moore, a young ranger named Tessa Moore, and Lauren not officially listed in the report, but the undeniable center of every decision. They traveled in 2 pickup trucks to the northern edge of the Bitterroot Range, where the paved road turned to gravel and then vanished into the deep forest. From there, it was on foot, or rather, climbing. Lost Widow Hollow lay hidden among steep valleys, its granite walls worn by time and ancient glaciers, forming jagged cliffs, razor-thin crevices, and underground waterfalls heard but not seen. Based on the terrain simulation and flood path from that March storm, Maisie's red carrier couldn't have rolled from any trail. It had to have come from a higher point, a dry, isolated place, swept away in a rare moment when the flood hit just right. That place could be where Connor was last alive, and if a miracle existed, where Maisie had been. On the afternoon of the second day, the group reached a weathered granite plateau, covered in gray-green moss, untouched by human footprints. Sarah, moving ahead along a protruding ledge, suddenly stopped, her eyes narrowing as if catching something. "Ben," she called, softly but clearly. "See anything, red?" Ben shielded his eyes from the late-day sun. Below Sarah, about 10 meters away, was a small crevice between two massive boulders where light couldn't reach. But something faint, like a deep red streak, peeked through the layers of rock moss. Could be a plastic bag, Ben guessed. Could be something once stuck there. But Lauren, looking up, knew. That color didn't belong here. Red, fabric, man-made. A faint hiss escaped her as she pushed through the brush, climbing to where Sarah stood. She said nothing, only crouched low, peering into the gap. "We have to get down there," she whispered. Accessing the crevice required skill and equipment. Randy and Ben anchored a rope to a natural fixed point, and Randy was the first to descend. Below was a narrow, 30-foot deep fissure, almost completely dark, with only faint light filtering from above. But the air here was drier, quieter, safer. And that's when Randy saw it. A red baby carrier. A high-end Columbia model, wedged between two rock slabs, its straps tangled, its aluminum frame partially broken. "It's here," he shouted. "It's the carrier. No mistaking it." Sarah and Lauren slid down almost simultaneously, hurried but cautious. When they reached it, no one spoke for a minute. The carrier was an unnatural part of the stone world, bright red against gray ash, a crack in time meeting the man-made. It was eerily intact. No tears, no rot, just caked with dry dirt and rock dust. Lauren knelt down. She touched the zipper, her hands trembling. "It couldn't have been here for 5 years, Sarah said, her voice small, as if afraid to wake something sleeping. "The fabric's intact, the zipper's not rusted." "It was brought here recently," Lauren nodded. "Connor kept it. Somewhere. In a cave or a shelter. Until the water swept it away." It took the group nearly an hour to hoist the carrier out of the crevice, handling it as carefully as if it were the remains of a soul. When light hit the inside, Lauren saw something that choked her. A green plastic bowl with a cat design, the kind Maisie used for oatmeal every morning. It was cracked slightly. Inside were dry white crumbs. Maybe powdered milk. "She survived," Ben whispered. "She was eating somewhere nearby." But where and why was no one there now? When they returned to the ranger station that night, the team felt like they'd emerged from a ritual. Lauren handed the carrier to Felicia. "This is a message from her," she said, not crying. "She's saying, I was here, you're on the right track." Felicia began the forensic process, every thread, every speck of dust, every scratch, as if decoding a map from a forgotten world. But for Lauren, it was clear. She wasn't searching anymore, she was getting closer. Connor might be dead, but Maisie, maybe not. And if she was still out there, her survival was the final proof that a father's love had kept his daughter from nature's cruelest grasp. Lauren had seen the red mark on the gray stone, and that was a promise she wouldn't stop. Not now, not when the last drop of blood hadn't dried. The carrier sat on the examination table in Missoula's forensic lab, still under cold white light, like a relic that had survived a myth. Felicia Gant, a material and scene analyst, stood motionless for a long moment before putting on gloves. She knew what she was about to uncover could redefine an investigation the police had abandoned half a decade ago. Lauren stood outside the glass room, eyes fixed on the carrier. Without speaking, she knew it had been hidden somewhere, not in that crevice, and moved in a random event. Maybe a flood. Maybe a human hand. But it definitely hadn't been there for 5 years. Felicia started with a simple test, measuring the hue of the red remaining on the nylon surface. She compared it to a sample of the same model from 2018. The result, the red had faded slightly, unevenly, but showed no severe UV degradation. "It could only have been in sunlight for a few months," she muttered. "If it was outdoors for 5 years, this fabric would have turned pale pink or gray-white. This is still blood red." Next were the strap and back panel fabrics. Felicia used an electron microscope to check the nylon and polyester fibers, softness, stretch, tensile strength. The initial conclusion showed the fibers retained near-intact elasticity, not brittle, not cracked. Impossible if it had been frozen, soaked, and dried hundreds of times in the Rockies' harsh conditions. But the most shocking discovery came from inside. The closed cell foam in the back and shoulder straps was bone dry. No moldy smell, no water retention, no signs of biological decay. Felicia sliced a tiny sample for molecular spectroscopy, no oxidation. "I'm certain," she said at the afternoon briefing. "This carrier couldn't have been in nature for more than a few months. It was kept somewhere, sealed, dry, stable temperature. A cave, a room, a natural rock hollow, and it was only swept away recently." All eyes turned to Lauren. She said nothing, just nodded. Ben Carter, the group's biggest skeptic, now had to admit, so someone, or Connor himself, kept this carrier for years, somewhere nearby. And something, a big event, caused it to be swept away. A flash flood, Sarah nodded. That heavy rain last March, nearly 10 inches in 4 hours. Rock slides, mud flows, collapses. We have records of 2 wooden bridges in the park being washed away. A southern trail section completely caved in, Randy added, meaning, wherever Connor and Maisie were hiding all that time, could have been obliterated in the flood. And the carrier, along with everything else, was pulled by the water. A 3D topographic map lit up. Based on flow direction and slope, Felicia pointed, if the flood moved from southern Lost Widow Hollow, the place where the carrier was originally hidden would be here. She circled a jagged rock area near the peak of Widow's Spine, a zone the 2018 search team had flown over, but never set foot in. Too treacherous, too far from the trail. Lauren leaned in, staring at the map point. That was where Connor might have tried to take Maisie. A place isolated from everyone, where no one would find them. Where he thought he'd keep her safe from cold and predators. And maybe, where he died. But if so, what happened to Maisie? Why no body? Why no traces other than the carrier? "We're not looking for survivors anymore," Randy said softly. "We're looking for an explanation." But Lauren disagreed. No. She could still be alive. Connor kept her safe for 5 years. He didn't give up. Neither will I. No one argued. No one dared. In a room filled with fluorescent light and digital maps, a new search took shape, no longer tracking a hiker in the woods, but tracing a water flow, finding the place where the carrier had lain silent for 5 years. Before fate brought it into the light, the carrier couldn't have been there for 5 years. The statement echoed in Lauren's mind like an invisible drum, urging, rushing, haunting. If it wasn't there, where did it come from? And what water carried it through fallen trees, crevices, sharp rock edges, only to end up wedged in a narrow gap where light reached just a few hours a day? The answer wasn't in the forest or footprints, but in the water. Not a topographic map, but a flood map. Lauren knew she needed people who didn't see mountains with their eyes, but through data flows and geology. Experts who could make water tell its story. A week later, the Missoula Geographic Analysis Center partnered with the park team to create a flood simulation model. Lauren sat in the command room, the 3D screen's light reflecting on her cheekbones. On the map, the southern Widow's Spine Plateau appeared like a giant vascular network, red, orange, purple lines representing the speed and volume of the March flood's flow. NASA satellite data, local weather station logs, and pre- and post-storm LiDAR images were fed into the system. If the carrier was swept away from anywhere, hydrologist Roland Shaw explained, it followed one of 47 main drainage paths. But if we add the wet weight of the carrier, about 28 pounds, and the drag coefficient from straps, fabric, frame structure, smaller streams are ruled out. Lauren nodded. They weren't tracking footprints, but tracing the path of a heavy floating object. "We kept only the flood streams strong enough to carry large logs," Roland continued, "and eliminated paths blocked by terrain, rock barriers, narrow gaps, sealed depressions. After nearly 10 hours of simulation, only one stream remained. A main channel starting from a deep hollow called Ravenback Hollow, nestled between 2 cliffs near Widow's Spine Peak, just behind where Connor had planned to go. It was never searched in 2018, simply because it wasn't on any trail and was deemed too steep for someone with a child to reach. But if anyone could get there, Lauren said quietly, it was Connor. An engineer asked, "Is it possible for an injured man with a child to hide there for days?" "No," Lauren replied. "But if Connor fell from somewhere and knew he was dying, he'd crawl to the most secluded place to put his daughter in one last safe spot. And if they had a hideout for 5 years, Connor would have prepared it like a true survival base. Roland emphasized, if the carrier was swept from Ravenback Hollow, it's highly likely that area was the hiding place. But we need on-site verification. That zone is nearly inaccessible without ropes, rock climbing skills, and medical support. Lauren turned to Randy. Then we go. 3 days later, a team of 5, Lauren, Randy, a climbing expert, a rescue technician, and a geologist, began the journey to Ravenback Hollow. No cameras, no media. Just flood maps, ropes, GPS, and a lingering question. Where had Connor kept his daughter for 5 years, and what ended it all? Their steps crunched through late-season snow, pressing into waterlogged ground. No trails, no signs of people. Only sheer rock walls and towering pines hiding something decayed beneath. The first day was just walking. The second brought signs. A long slide mark on a gravelly slope. A worn rope anchor on a rock, a frayed rope fragment. Lauren picked it up. REI brand, the kind Connor used. The air grew thick. No one spoke. They pressed on, and by afternoon, the flood map led them to a narrow rock crevice just wide enough for one person to slip through. Inside was pitch black, the smell of damp earth and moss hitting their noses. Lauren shone her flashlight inside. No dust stirred. No cobwebs. A place someone had been, and was no longer. She drew her knife, cleared the blocking brush, and slipped in. In the cold dark of the mountain crevice, where water once couldn't reach, something waited. Not a person, maybe a body, maybe an answer. And for the first time in 5 years, the water map, not humans, pointed the way. In the damp, cold dark of the crevice, the wind whistling through the rock walls sounded like an endless sigh. Lauren crouched as she moved deeper, her flashlight casting a dim, eerie beam on the wet stone. Each step echoed in the tight space, bouncing back with every breath, every scrape of her boots on fine sand and decayed leaves. Outside, Randy and 2 team members checked the safety from the cliff above, but here, in this rock womb, Lauren was alone. Because she knew, if Connor had been anywhere, if there was a final place where he'd poured his last strength to protect his daughter, it was here. She traced the left rock wall, searching for anomalies, an unexpectedly smooth surface, a scratch, or any man-made object time and nature had tried to hide. Then she froze. In the farthest corner, where darkness nearly swallowed the flashlight's beam, a thick patch of ferns grew unnaturally dense. Beneath it, on the stone floor, was a thin layer of soil, impossible without human hands disturbing it. Lauren knelt, gently brushing aside the decayed leaves with her gloved hand. A pale gray nylon strip emerged. Then a rusted zipper. Then a broken aluminum frame. "Randy," she called loudly, her voice trembling but clear. "I found it. Get in here." Minutes later, the team squeezed into the cave. They began clearing the area, each move deliberate. No one spoke of finding bodies, but everyone understood the possibility. And then, they saw it. Against the back rock wall, in a corner carefully shielded by stacked stones, was a human skeleton, curled, as if asleep. The clothing was shredded, the fabric mostly decayed, but the bones were nearly intact. No blood, no slashes, just a severe fracture in the pelvis and right leg, clear signs of a fall from a great height. Lauren stood frozen for seconds, gripping her flashlight. "Connor," she whispered, as if hoping he could still hear from somewhere. "You got her here." But then she noticed something. No child's body. No trace of a little girl, only the father. Beside him were the remains of a large hiking backpack, dismantled, perhaps used as a bed or windbreak. But in the middle of the cave, near the entrance, was a small blue blanket, neatly folded, with dark, dried stains. Beneath it was a cracked baby bottle and a half-rotted stuffed bear. Lauren knelt, gently lifting the toy, her fingers shaking. She didn't cry. Tears had no place in that moment. Only a piercing shock. Connor had died here, alone, with every sign that his daughter had survived at least a few days after the accident. But what happened to her? Who took the carrier? Who or what took Maisie, if not the water? Olivia, a former mountain rescuer, gently examined the scene. "No signs of a child moving after this point," she said softly. "If Maisie left here, she didn't walk out. Someone took her." The words silenced the group. A third person had been here. A lost hiker, a poacher, a forest hermit. Every theory was possible, and each was terrifying in its own way. Randy stood by the skeleton, lightly touching Connor's wrist, where a silver fabric strip was still tightly wound. He removed it and saw it was a strap with a small metal tag inscribed inside. If found, tell Lauren. Tell her, I never gave up. Lauren bit her lip. The metal tag trembled in her hand. You fought to the end, she whispered. You didn't abandon Maisie. You tried until the last. As the weak afternoon light filtered into the crevice, illuminating the cold stone, the group stood silent. They knew this was Connor's end, but it couldn't be the end of finding Maisie. Connor had survived the fall, kept his daughter safe for days, and died believing someone would find her. Lauren leaned down, rearranging the stone pillow Connor had lain on, placing the stuffed bear back in the corner as a farewell. We're not stopping here, she said. If Connor didn't give up, neither will I. She left the cave, stepping into the light, carrying the final clue, and planning the next step. Maisie was still alive, or at least, someone knew what happened to her. And this time, Lauren wasn't searching as a coordinator, but as a mother who'd lost everything, except hope. The next dawn painted a cold pink across the Rockies' snowy peaks, but at the Brush Creek Valley Ranger Station, no one noticed the beauty. Connor was confirmed. The skeleton was sent to Denver's forensic lab for dental and DNA verification. But for Lauren, what kept her awake wasn't what they'd found, it was what they hadn't. Maisie wasn't there, no blood, no second skeleton, no clear sign a child had died in the cave. Instead, the folded blanket, bottle and bear suggested she'd lived a significant time after Connor's accident. So what happened? 3 days later, the forensic report arrived. Connor died from severe pelvic and right leg trauma. But that wasn't the most shocking part. On his 7th left rib was a deep, clean, sharp cut. Not a fracture from impact, but a clear mark of a sharp metal object. This cut happened before or just after death. The forensic expert said, eyes on the report. And it doesn't seem self-inflicted. The angle and force don't match his position. In the quiet room, the statement hit like lightning. Lauren gripped the table's edge. He didn't die alone, she whispered. Someone was in the cave, after Connor died, or before. The pieces began to fall into place. The red carrier impossible to have sat in a crevice for 5 years, yet placed there just months before its discovery. Someone had kept it, hidden it. Someone might have taken Maisie, and that someone might have witnessed or even caused Connor's death. Lauren didn't voice the thought, but Randy did. An outsider was in Widow's Rest Basin that day. Not a passerby. Not just someone who found the carrier, a key figure in the tragedy, and possibly the last to see Maisie alive. The team returned to the scene immediately. They scoured every centimeter of the cave floor with UV lights, soil sample vials, and metal detectors. While excavating near the cave entrance, they found a small metal object, about 20 centimeters long, with a curved tip and a nearly rotted wooden handle, a handmade dagger, roughly crafted, more like a homemade tool than a commercial knife. More importantly, the handle still had green duct tape tightly wrapped around it, the kind often used by hunting and poaching groups. This looks like past violations around Barrow Creek Trail, a ranger muttered. Ginseng poachers. Lauren turned to him. You're talking about poachers? Yeah. There are a few local groups living on the park's fringes. They dodge the law, know the forest like the back of their hands, and often sneak in to harvest illegally. No one's caught them red-handed. But this kind of knife, he held up the item. I've confiscated a few just like it. She said nothing. But inside, something slammed shut. Connor didn't just have an accident. He and his daughter might have been found by a group who didn't want to be seen. And they acted. Immediately, violation records were pulled. Many familiar names surfaced, but one stood out. Jeb and Talia Whitmore, a couple repeatedly warned for trespassing in restricted areas, carrying unregistered tools, and with a history of run-ins with rangers. Notably, in November 2018, just a month after Connor and Luna vanished, the couple abruptly left Wyoming, sold their mobile home, and disappeared from local records. No trace left behind. Lauren stared at the note. Left suddenly. Reason unknown. Her chest tightened. Did they know something? Were they involved in what happened in that cave? And most importantly, what did they do with Luna? The room's air grew heavy. A decision was made. This was no longer a search. It was a criminal investigation. The Wyoming TBI, State Bureau of Investigation, officially stepped in. Files were reopened. Digital footprints traced. If Jeb and Talia Whitmore were still in the U.S., they'd be found. And if Luna, If the child from years ago was alive, the truth would no longer be buried under rock and silence. The name Whitmore quickly became the focus of every investigation meeting. A thin file, a few old violation notes, grainy 2016 ID photos, that was all the system had. But Lauren, staring at Talia's face in the ID photo, dark eyes, tangled hair, felt a sharp instinct, a chill in the summer heat. She didn't need proof. She knew this woman was tied to Luna. The hunt began with administrative data. Talia and Jeb Whitmore had lived in a Cody, Wyoming trailer park. They left in 2018, right after Connor and Luna's disappearance, selling their mobile home for cash and never using their social security numbers again. No rental registrations, no bank accounts, but no one vanishes completely. What they didn't know was that a 2017 violation photo, when Jeb was cited for dumping trash in the park, had been logged into a national database. TBI's facial recognition system cross-referenced it with traffic cameras across states. Within 48 hours, a lead emerged. A New Mexico traffic camera caught Jeb Whitmore driving an old silver pickup truck just 3 months prior. From there, their trail sharpened. Cash payments at a small auto shop, a license plate noted at an overnight rest stop in Las Cruces. After weeks of tracking, their new address surfaced. A rundown wooden house on the edge of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, outside Taos. The house was shrouded in trees, unregistered, but a neighbor said, the couple lives reclusively with a girl, about 6, rarely leaves. Lauren's heart pounded at that detail. A girl, 6 years old. A perfect match for Luna. But if it was her daughter, she'd grown up not knowing her real mother, unaware of Connor, unaware of the name Luna. That child wouldn't see her as anything. For the girl's psychological safety, the team chose a soft approach. A small group, agents, a psychologist, and Ranger Randy. The only one who'd known Connor in person and had a kind uncle-like face, went in. No weapons, no uniforms, just 3 people knocking on an old wooden house in the mountain dusk. The door creaked open after a chain rattled. The face that appeared wasn't young nor easily cowed. It was Talia. Her eyes lingered on Randy's face. For a split second, Lauren, watching from afar, saw the woman's hands tremble. I'm Ranger Randy. I'm here about an old case from 2018 in Wyoming. Talia didn't respond. Jeb stepped forward from inside, asking low, what's this about? The investigator held up a clear evidence bag. Inside was the dagger with the green taped handle, found under the cave's soil. No one spoke, but Talia's face went paper white. She stepped back, eyes welling, mumbling almost inaudibly. I thought that was buried. The door opened. And behind them, from the staircase, a little girl appeared. Dark, slightly messy hair, big eyes, clutching a dark brown stuffed bear. The same bear that vanished with Connor and Luna that fateful day. The girl didn't know who stood at the door. She didn't know Lauren Reeds. She just looked up and asked softly, Mom, who's that? Lauren couldn't hold back tears. She couldn't rush forward. She couldn't call Luna in that moment. The child, if it was Luna, needed the truth slowly, not as a shock from a stranger. Right then, Talia sank into a chair, face in her hands. In a choked voice, she began to tell the real story of 2018, when they were poaching herbs and heard a child's cry echoing from the valley. They found Connor injured, blood soaking the stone, and a trembling child in his arms, a father who begged them to take her. Don't let her die, he gasped. Save her, please. Jeb had considered calling for help, but they were breaking the law, carrying knives, no permits, afraid, panicked, and in that cowardice, they chose to flee, taking the child, leaving the dying father behind. Lauren sat silently. Every worst-case scenario she'd imagined became real. Connor died, but before he did, he tried to save his daughter any way he could. And Luna, the child she thought had dissolved into the Rockies' mist, was standing just steps away, unaware of the mother crying inside. They took DNA samples. They took Luna gently, without force, to child services and a psychologist. But Lauren knew, the reunion she'd longed for wouldn't come like a miracle. It would be a painful journey, with buried memories and a name waiting to be called back from the heart. Lauren sat in the car, hands gripping the strap of a canvas bag, holding the sealed DNA file. The early sun crept through the mountain gaps, casting cold gold on the tin roof of the wooden house where Luna spent her first night away from the people she called parents. No one in the team slept much after yesterday. The test results came from Denver's lab in just 36 hours, faster than expected, due to national priority case status. The bolded line at the top of the report left no one calm. Result: confirmed maternal relationship. Lauren cried, laughed, then choked. The daughter she thought lay frozen somewhere in the snowy mountains was alive, breathing, just 10 steps away. But that didn't mean she could run and embrace her, saying, "I'm your mom." Luna, or Ellie, as Talia and Jeb called her, didn't know her. To the 6-year-old's mind, Lauren Reeds was just a stranger with a trembling voice and wet eyes. Nothing more. That morning, the team's psychologist, Dr. Gabrielle Moreno, was clear with Lauren. "Luna won't recognize you, don't force it. Safety comes first." So, the first meeting was held at a Santa Fe child care center in a pastel room with stuffed animals and soft light. Lauren stood behind one-way glass. On the other side, Luna was assembling a puzzle. Light fell on her soft black hair, and Lauren had to brace herself not to shatter the glass to hold her daughter. Her hand pressed the glass as if to bridge the gap, whispering, knowing no one could hear, "My baby." The days that followed were slow. Lauren was allowed to play with Luna in the room as Aunt Lauren, the doctor's friend. Luna was cautious, but not distant. She giggled during puzzles, occasionally asking innocent questions like, "Do you like dogs or cats? Or can you make marshmallows?" Lauren swallowed tears, answering each as if it were her last chance to enter her daughter's small world. On the fourth night, Luna suddenly asked, "Aunt Lauren, why are you always sad?" Lauren froze. The question was light as a breath, but stabbed like a knife. She answered softly, "Because I miss someone so much." Luna tilted her head. "Your daughter?" Lauren only smiled. Meanwhile, the investigation into Talia and Jeb Whitmore moved to trial. They faced charges of failure to aid a person in danger, resulting in death, and kidnapping a minor. But the case wasn't simple. Both claimed Connor gave them the child, begging them to save her, and their actions, though wrong, stemmed from panic, not malice. Their lawyer didn't deny guilt, but stressed that for 5 years, the child was well cared for, not abused, not exploited. Some jurors wavered. Justice wasn't just a gavel of right or wrong. It was about a child torn from memory. A father who died, trusting in strangers' kindness. For Lauren, the real matter wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the heart of a girl named Luna, slowly forming a new memory. On the 15th day in care, Luna looked at Lauren and whispered, eyes on no one else, "I dreamed of a man. He wore a green hat. He carried me." Lauren choked. It was Connor, no doubt. She broke down. Her little girl, beneath layers of buried memory, still held a piece of her father, and Lauren knew this was the start, not of vengeance, but of revival. 7 months later, on a sunny but razor-sharp March morning, Lauren Reeds held her daughter's hand along a wooden boardwalk to a southern Sangre de Cristo lookout. Luna wore a thick mustard-yellow coat, clutching a slightly worn cloth doll named Mara. Wind hustled her black hair, but she didn't complain. Each step was slow, cautious, but sure, as if learning to walk into her new world. Lauren said nothing. She just looked to the horizon, where sunlight poured over snowy peaks, glowing gold as it had 5 years ago, when Connor was alive. When Luna didn't yet know she'd be torn from everything. Rebuilding their bond wasn't a straight path. Some mornings, Luna woke crying, not recognizing her room, not hearing Dad Jeb or Mom Talia. Some nights, Lauren sat silently by the door, hearing her daughter sob for home, her heart tearing apart. But there were moments no trial or verdict could buy, when Luna whispered, "Mom, read me a story," or ran to her after her first therapy session, hugging her silently. Motherhood was a slow song, but it could play again if you waited for the chorus. After the trial, Talia and Jeb received 5 years probation, permanently banned from contacting Luna. Some public opinion protested. They raised her for 5 years, they must have loved her. But deep down, justice wasn't heartless. It demanded the truth be named. And the truth was, Connor Reeds died in a cold crevice, believing his daughter would be saved. That was a death no one could excuse with cowardice. Lauren didn't hate them. She just felt empty. But that emptiness wasn't a dark abyss anymore. It was a quiet space to begin again. After all, the miracle happened. The daughter she thought lost was here. Still laughing, running, holding her hand, asking, "Mom, do you like drawing mountains?" At the lookout, Luna climbed the final wooden step and stopped. Lauren stepped up behind her, gazing at the vast expanse. The mountains stretched, blue-green like petrified waves. The sun was high, making the snowy peaks gleam sharp enough to cut. Luna looked at her mother and suddenly asked, "Did my dad like this place?" Lauren nodded, throat tight. "He said if he had another life, he'd be a cloud drifting over these peaks, so every morning his daughter could look up and see him." Luna went quiet, then pointed to the sky. "I see him, Mom." Lauren cried, silently. Just a tear rolling from her left eye down her cheek. Sometimes, all tragedy needs is a moment like this to close. Not with full forgiveness, but with a look toward the sun, where someone you love might be smiling quietly from the clouds. Luna turned to her mother. "Tell me about meeting Dad," and for the first time, Lauren didn't start with tears. She sat, pulled her daughter into her lap, and told her about a man who carried her on his back, showed her a deer crossing a valley, loved the color green, and walked paths her mother hadn't dared to tread. He left her a saying she'd carry for life. "Nature never errs, only people lose their way." In Lauren's heart, Connor's memory lived not as a grave to visit, but as a mountain, cold, towering, where the sun still rose each morning. Whether anyone looked or not, the story of Connor and Luna Reeds isn't just a tragedy of a wilderness disappearance, it's a profound reminder of faith, responsibility, and the enduring power of truth. In today's American society, where news spreads fast, but truth is sometimes buried under layers of doubt and assumption, this story reflects a painful reality. We often rush to conclusions before patiently searching. Connor wasn't the runaway father the public once suspected. He sacrificed his life to save his daughter, entrusting his last hope to anyone who found them. But it took 5 years, thanks to a small detail, a red baby carrier found in a crevice, for the truth to emerge. This shows the importance of not giving up too soon, especially in missing persons cases. Lauren, the mother, embodies thousands of Americans still searching daily for their children, believing a single clue could be the key. Meanwhile, the Mayfair's wrong actions, taking Luna in panic, then loving her as their own, raise questions about morality, responsibility, and the consequences of decisions made in fear. Ultimately, justice doesn't come from cold punishment, but from acknowledgement, atonement, and giving wounds a chance to heal. For every parent, the biggest lesson might be in any circumstance, never stop believing in what's right, because sometimes, the sun rises again, even on mountains that once buried hope. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to join us in uncovering truths hidden in the dark. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video, where hope sometimes returns from places no one expects.